Welcome to the Retirement Architect with David Reyes. Our program is designed to not only provide insight, but to educate and give you the tools you need to design and build a rock-solid retirement.
Back once again with the Retirement Architect, David Reyes from Reyes Financial Architecture. And we are going through the Are You Ready to Retire checklist. 12 important must-answer questions to know if you are financially prepared for a confident retirement. David, in the last episode of the podcast, we went over the first 4 questions on the checklist. Do you know how long you would be able to generate the income you need if your paycheck stopped today? Have you identified and calculated your retirement income gap? Do you know how much you have available in discretionary assets over and above what's needed to generate income? And then do you know if your portfolio is properly diversified to provide enough growth, safety, liquidity, and income? Moving on to the next question. Do you hold annual reviews of your plan to assess if you have met previous goals and benchmarks and to set new goals and benchmarks? Now, in a year like 2022, where we've had market turbulence, volatility, and as a result have seen portfolio losses, is it still possible that we have made progress and met goals and benchmarks in the prior year?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that probably half my clients are about to retire. The other half are already retired. That's new clients and existing clients, I would say. So I have a pretty good insight into that. You know, typically, if you have enough money, I think one of the biggest mistakes people make in this market right now, speaking of what's going on right now, is being afraid to retire even when they have enough money. And unfortunately, the only way to know that is to go through the process and talk to somebody, or hopefully do it yourself at a minimum, but talk to a professional that's what they do every day. And because I've seen a couple clients that I'm thinking about right now, prospective clients, that we did a plan for them and they're just so scared emotionally by what's going on with the market, they've deferred their retirement plans. So I can't even imagine the people out there that maybe could even retire today, regardless, of what's going on in the stock market, because it's not about there's an old saying that, what got you to where you're at today is not necessarily going to get you where you're going to go tomorrow. Right. And so how people are investing today is going to be a lot different than how we're going to manage their money. Right. So I can't speak to what they would do or another advisor would do. And typically you find when we do that, if the client has done their job and saved their money, most people, regardless of what's going on in this market, they're probably going to be okay. Now, I've also had clients come to me this year that are down for. I have one client in particular that just hired us and pretty high net worth guy. He lost $3 million this year, right? He's in the tech business, and of course 95% of his portfolio was technology, and he's taken the whole brunt of that. Now also that's part of the reason he has the money he has too. So he has more money today than he would have had if he hadn't made those investments. But the nice part for him and his family and his wife is that they're still able to retire, and he's 62 years old. It's retiring early. So really, it's an unknown question until you go through the process, to me, with somebody who is what they do every day, whether it's me or somebody else, because on your own, it's almost impossible to answer that question because we're too close to it. We really need a second opinion, a second set of eyes to really say, hey, is this possible? And if not, what do I need to do to get there?
David, hasn't it been shown repeatedly that emotional investing and decisions based on the direction of the market more often are mistakes than if we have a plan-oriented decision-making process?
Yeah, I mean, most people only need about a 5 or 6% rate of return every year to have a great retirement. And that's the big myth. We don't need what the stock market does. It really doesn't matter, quite honestly, on a day-to-day basis, even on a year-over-year basis, if you have a plan where you've built your portfolio to deal with those issues. So that's why if somebody has enough assets, I don't care what's going on with the market, we can probably reposition the portfolio so they're going to be fine. So yeah, it's more, behavioral finance is something I have a lot of passion for. And unfortunately, I always say that, clients are human tells. I remember, 2 years ago when Bitcoin was at 60,000, I'm getting all these calls, thank God not from my clients, but a lot of prospective clients from my radio and TV show. What do you think about Bitcoin? Not that my clients were immune from that, but it was like, okay, top of the mark for Bitcoin. right?
Not as many calls now that it's at 16 or 17,000.
I said, why don't you call me when it's down 60, 70%, and we can see if you're still so gung-ho. So that's a perfect example of how clients see, money. And it makes sense. I'm not being critical. It's just the way it is. It's an emotional thing. Watching the stock market, watching your portfolio, it can be both good and bad. And typically that's not a good way to make investment decisions and retirement decisions about your money.
Again, speaking with the retirement architect, he helps people retire every day. You retire once, ladies and gentlemen. So have that plan in place, that retirement blueprint. And a long way in that effort is having confident answers to the 12 questions on this resource. Are you ready to retire? If you would like this list to go over on your own to make sure that you have answers to these questions, or if you would like a time to sit down with David and the team there at Reyes Financial Architecture to construct your retirement blueprint, pick up the phone, give a call, 858-597-1966. That's 858-597-1966. And now we get into the minutia of maximizing parts of the plan. Turning the corner here, number 6 on the list. Have you formulated a plan for how to use Social Security to maximize income and protect your personal assets? I like the wording of this one, David. It's not, have you rushed out and made a decision? Have you claimed and collected your Social Security? But have you actually thought it through and utilized it and maximized it?
Yeah. And I look at Social Security a little differently. We actually were very blessed to win. There's an association for National Security Advisory Council. I forget the name of the group, but I think we were the second winner of that nationally. So we were credited. I think it was 2015, a long time ago. But the only reason I bring that up, not because we're so awesome, is that I spent a lot of time studying this kind of stuff over the years. And here's the reality. I look at Social Security as an asset, right? It's like, how do we maximize that asset, right? And part of it is, Social Security's changed a lot over the last 20 years. It used to be we paid no taxes on Social Security. And thanks to good old Bill Clinton back in the 90s, they changed that. And so, I'm a little more aggressive, I will tell you, with claiming than I used to be. And it's part of the way I feel about it. What's the Social Security Trust Fund supposed to run to money in 2033, 2030 now? It keeps getting moved up.
It does. Keeps getting closer.
It does. And I remember when I first started doing this a long time ago, they talked about that back in the 2090s. So dating myself, but and not that we can print our own money. So we're not going to run out of money. It might be these giant IOUs, which it already is. But the fact is I am a little more. I used to have a lot more clients, let's put it this way, that defer to 70. We try to get to full retirement age regardless. But it just depends on what I tell clients that, look, do you want to spend the government's money first or your own money first? Right. And I pose that to the client, not that I'm making judgment on it. I'm just saying, hey, do we trust ourselves to manage our money? Because if we're going to defer Social Security, it's not free. Right. We're giving up, between 66 and 70 is $100,000 of assets at a minimum, maybe more, maybe closer to 150,000, depending upon your wages. So it's not free. Right. The break even point can be into your late 70s, early 80s. Right. So I like to make it more simplistic. We have software that gives us all the fancy answers, but typically we got to look at what are our thoughts about the government, right? About Social Security of itself. Do we have the flexibility within our planning to make our own decisions about that? Some clients don't have. Really, we have to. The lower assets we have, I would say we have to defer Social Security as long as possible because of the guarantees of it, kind of like an annuity. So there's a lot of, again, kind of that art and science of where, there's a lot of the X's and O's where you can say, okay, here's what the computer program says to do. And a lot of times that's not the answer. But you need to go through that exercise from a math, from a number standpoint, but also you have to overlay that with your investments and then kind of make your own decision on what you feel comfortable doing.
And there's the big omission in my mind is that all of the online tools and calculators that I have ever seen put Social Security as though it's in a vacuum alone on an island, do not incorporate it with the rest of your financial situation. And even the folks down at the Social Security Administration office do not provide guidance. Don't take on that responsibility because they are there to help you file the claim on the day that you show up, not tell you if it's the best day to show up. And so again, why it's an important question here.
Well, yeah, it's almost like the CPA, and my better half is a CPA, so I say this respectfully. CPAs in most are scorekeepers. They're not telling you how to reduce your taxes, right? You're telling you here's the score, right? Here's what you did, here's what happened, and that's what Social Security does. Basically, Social Security offices, they cannot legally give you advice, let alone about when to take Social Security. But also, it's an asset. It's an asset. So we got assets here. We got real estate. We've got our investments. We've got Social Security. We may have a pension. We have to combine all this. So it's not a straightforward question. I would say if we're going to get involved, our job is to optimize, right? You can do it on your own. People that have enough assets most times will probably be okay. But I don't want to just be okay. I want to lead the highest quality of life I can for myself. I want to leave as much, if that's the goal, for my clients, to their children. So we want to be very efficient with our money. And so that's just the way I look at it. It's like unturning every stone. How do we maximize everything? You have to do that on an integrated basis, or you're going to leave something behind.
Next on the list of the 12 questions to know if you are prepared for retirement. And this is that stone, David, that I think most people just ignore and leave alone. This is really the 800-pound gorilla in the room that nobody, including I recently saw the Office of Personnel Management, kind of the HR department for the federal government themselves, don't have a fantastic answer for. But there are answers out there. I know. Do you know how you would cover the cost of medical and or long-term care expenses should you or your spouse require that care? David, a very touchy topic and one that a lot of people kind of choose to blindly ignore. Whether willful negligence or not, but one that we absolutely need to, in order to have a more confident retirement, face head on, address, and at least know what our plan and approach is going to be.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have some very personal experience. My first year in the business in 1995, my grandfather lost everything after a 5-year battle with dementia. He went from, he wasn't a wealthy person, but he had, he used to work for Sears back when Sears was kind of a thriving company. He was actually a television repairman. And back when that was a job, believe it or not. And he had dementia for about 5 years and wiped out his entire savings. In fact, the government put a lien against his house because he qualified for Medi-Cal here in California because he was basically indigent. Because in order to qualify for Medi-Cal, you can only have $2,000 in the bank, a burial plot, a wedding ring, a car, and a house. But what people don't know is that once you pass, if you have that little house, they can reach back in and recover. It's called recovery. They can recover any assets that are there to cover the bill they paid for you. So it's not free. And so long story short, I ended up hiring an attorney, elder law attorney, that had to wind me through this. Again, this is my first year in the business when my grandfather died. And so I got a nice phone call from my mother crying on the phone, telling me that there was a lien against the property because grandpa, because of his long-term care costs. So this is very up close and personal to me. You can imagine your first year in the business and your grandfather, you basically lose all of his assets, and to add insult to injury, we may lose the house that he left to my mother. So needless to say, I have a little bit of experience in this and a lot of passion for it. Here's the hard truth. Most clients are just ill prepared for it. And unfortunately, long-term care costs have just skyrocketed in the last 20 years, last 10 years specifically. What happened was the long-term care industry mispriced the policies. They thought that more people would terminate like a term insurance policy. 97% of all term policies expire worthless, and they kind of put the same numbers on long-term care. And I think the number is like 70 to 80% of clients keep their long-term care policies. So the cost and the tail risk of these companies is massive. So the reality is most clients don't want to pay for it. But at least what we can do, and I try to show clients, is that here's what your exposure is to it. And so I would say less than 10% of my clients want to pay for long-term care coverage, regardless of their economic situation. It's just something that's hard for them to do. So what we can do as a firm is try to protect and grow their assets as much as possible, because we don't want to spend down the money, right? Like the Monte Carlo simulation is going to do, like most of the retirement planning software says, here's what the average rate of return is, and you won't run out of money until you're 100. Well, here's the problem. What if you have a long-term care event? What if you have a health event? I got to make sure my clients at least have the money to be able to pay for those expensive end of life. So the answer is if we can afford, I'd rather a client own a long-term care policy. but the reality is most people don't want to pay for it. So we have to be good stewards of their investments to help them to have those assets in case they need them down the road.
This is such a difficult issue to work through. But again, in order to have a more confident retirement, to feel prepared about it, you need to understand your approach and how you are planning for all 12 of the questions on this important list. If you would like the list to go over on your own and make sure that you have answers to these questions, or if you would like to sit down and construct that retirement blueprint, pick up the phone and give Reyes Financial Architecture a call, 858-597-1966. That's 858-597-1966. 858-597-1966, or you can visit online, reyesplan.com. That's REYES plan.com, reyesplan.com. A great resource here. Again, David, thank you for bringing this information to us. Not every question has an easy answer, but we need to understand what our answer is in order to have as much retirement confidence as possible.
Absolutely. It's we pride ourselves in being, honest, having integrity, and I'm a pretty straightforward guy. And so, I will tell certain clients, it depends. I mean, family history is one big one. To kind of wrap this up a little bit, I had a client that both her mother and father, grandparents, sister, all had dementia or Alzheimer's, right? It's like, and she had that fast. I'm like, look, we probably want to buy a policy, right? Yeah, just to protect the spouse.
I have to imagine, like you shared with us firsthand, folks that have experienced this personally probably are more apt to be the ones that want to address it. Is that what you find?
Yeah. Not just the financial, but being a caretaker. That's the hardest part. I'd say the money part, of course, is difficult, but people that have actually had experience and having to take care of a loved one, a parent, a spouse, a brother, sister, they're much more open to that. And again, there's more creative ways to pay for it. And so what we always promise clients is if we feel it's an important thing, we're going to take the time to go through it with you. Regardless if you decide that you want to buy a long-term care policy. I mean, who wants to do that? Who wants to spend the money? But really, I look at it as asset protection. It's part of managing the risk that we're buying some insurance for the portfolio. So especially if clients want to make sure their kids aren't burdened by it and they want to leave more money to the children, I say, if that's a really primary goal, you really want to look at long-term care coverage as a way to ensure that not only do you have the money for yourself, but to leave more assets to your children.
Part of the retirement blueprint and planning process, and one of the important 12 questions on the Are You Ready to Retire checklist, ladies and gentlemen. If you'd like to have that complimentary review retirement planning strategy session along with the retirement architect, David Reyes, pick up the phone, give a call, 858-597-1966. If you'd like this list to go over on your own time, call that same number, 858-597-1966, or visit reyesplan.com, REYES plan.com. Always a pleasure, David. Thank you for being here as the constant reminder of what is important in planning and the resource to help proactive planners.
No, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for spending your time with us again this week. Get the most out of your retirement plan. Call 866-REYES-PLAN. That's 866-REYES-PLAN, 866-739-3775, or visit reyesplan.com.
No information presented today should be acted upon without meeting with a qualified and licensed professional. Reyes Financial Architecture, Inc., RFA, is an SEC-registered investment advisory firm. Such registration does not imply a certain level of skill or training. For a copy of RFA's current form ADV 2A brochure that includes a description of services provided, fees charged, and other important information, call 858-597-1966 or go to advisorinfo.sec.gov. RFA also is a licensed insurance agency with the state of California. License number 0G66604. This show is provided for informational purposes only. Opinions expressed in the show reflect RFA views as of the date of the recording and are subject to change. Nothing should be construed as a comprehensive statement of the matters discussed, considered investment, financial, legal, or tax advice, or a recommendation to buy or sell any type of security, and no investment decision should be made based solely on any information provided. Any forward-looking statements or forecasts discussed are based on assumptions, and actual results can vary from any such statements. Some of the information provided has been obtained by third parties and believed to be reliable, but not guaranteed. Past performance is not an indication of future returns. With respect respect to any discussion about RFA investment strategies. There's no guarantee that they will be profitable or perform as described during the show. RFA or one or more of its employees may have a position in the securities discussed and may purchase or sell such securities from time to time. All investments in securities carry risk, including the risk of losing principal amount invested. Different types of investments involve varying degrees of risk. There can be no assurance that any specific investment or investment product will be profitable or suitable for a particular investor's financial situation or risk tolerance. Asset allocation and portfolio diversification cannot ensure or guarantee better performance and cannot eliminate the risk of investment losses. Annuity guarantees are based solely on the financial strength and claims paying ability of the issuing insurance company. Withdrawals of growth from annuities may be taxable as ordinary income in the year it is taken. Surrender charges apply to base contracts. Optional life income benefit riders are used to calculate lifetime income payments only and are not available for cash surrender or in a death benefit. Fees may apply. Individuals should review contracts for specific details of the product's features and costs. Early withdrawals may subject the owner to penalties, fees, or taxes. Rates and returns mentioned on this program are subject to change without notice.